Lanterns glimmered across Ravenshore Manor's sprawling garden, their warm halos trembling in the soft dusk, as if uncertain whether to join the laughter drifting through the conservatory. Lady Eveline Hartwell stood near the marble fountain, feigning composure while the evening pressed close against her ribs. The scent of roses clung to the air, too sweet, too heavy, as though it might drown the quieter truths she carried inside. She held her chin high, pretending she did not hear the whispers that trail behind her like thin, biting threads. Yet every stolen glance felt sharper than the last. Eveline had always been known for her spirited tongue, a brightness she used as armor in rooms where she otherwise felt invisible. Tonight, however, her familiar teasing had betrayed her. She had made a light jest to Duke Adrian Ravenshore. Something harmless, something she had said always, something she believed would ease the tension she saw in his eyes. But a pair of ladies nearby overheard, twisting the harmless remark into a tale of impertinence. Within minutes, murmurs spread through the garden like wildfire leaping from leaf to leaf. "She thinks herself close to him," one lady whispered behind a lace fan. "Far too bold. A lady should know her place. Maybe she believes he'll consider her," another added with quiet cruelty. "Poor girl. Hope makes fools of the unchosen." The words stung, but Eveline smiled tightly, determined to show nothing. She had grown too accustomed to being judged for her honesty, for her curious mind, for her refusal to shrink into a decorative silence like so many preferred. Yet tonight the judgment felt different, barbed, humiliating, almost purposeful. Her heart fluttered in a frantic rhythm she could not steady. She breathed slowly, trying to calm the tremor in her chest. Adrian's gaze found her from across the lantern-lit walkway. The Duke rarely displayed emotions beyond duty and composure, yet something flickered in his expression, an intensity that softened into concern. His dark attire cut a striking silhouette against the pale lights as he stepped toward her, shoulders squared with a quiet authority that drew attention even from those trying to avoid looking directly at him. A murmur rippled through the crowd as he approached. Eveline lowered her gaze, wishing she could simply disappear into the mosaic of shadows. When he reached her, he halted just close enough for her to feel the quiet power of his presence. "Lady Eveline," he said gently, his voice polished but carrying an edge she rarely heard. "Are you unwell?" "I am perfectly well, Your Grace," she replied, though the words came out thinner than she intended. "It is only warm near the fountain." He studied her, his brows narrowing as though reading beyond the veil of her composure. "You need not pretend you do not hear them," he murmured. "Their pettiness is hardly subtle." Eveline stiffened. "I pay them no mind. You should not have to endure such nonsense." His tone shifted, low and steady. "Those who judge you misunderstand you entirely." She glanced up, startled. He had never spoken to her with such deliberate gentleness. Her teasing, once a playful habit between them, suddenly felt fragile beneath the weight of his sincerity. She tried to deflect. "You speak as though you were my defender, Your Grace. I assure you, I require none." His jaw tightened, but he did not argue. Instead, he let his gaze linger on her for a heartbeat too long, as though measuring truths he had long avoided acknowledging. "Even so," he said softly, "you deserve fairness." The sincerity caught her off guard, stirring something warm and unsteady in the center of her chest. She looked away quickly, unwilling to let him see how deeply the moment affected her. The lantern light gilded the edges of his dark hair and cast faint gold along his cheekbones, making him look impossibly steady in all the ways she had never quite felt. A cluster of guests approached from behind them, whispering too loudly. Eveline heard her own name again, wrapped in ridicule she could not bear. Panic rose, and without thinking, she stepped back. "I should rejoin the others," she said, barely above a whisper. "It would not be proper to linger." Adrian's expression darkened. Eveline, but she had already turned away, retreating toward the conservatory doors. Her steps were careful, graceful, but each heartbeat struck like a bruise beneath her ribs. She had always teased him because it made the world feel lighter, because it made her feel less small. But now, under the merciless eyes of society, even her teasing seemed weaponized against her. She slipped inside the conservatory, where the glow of chandeliers shimmered across polished floors, and the murmured music drifted from the string ensemble preparing for the evening dance. The soft clinking of crystal felt distant, hollow. She pressed a hand to her sternum, feeling the ache of unspoken things, feeling she had always kept tucked away, believing he would never see her as anything more than a childhood acquaintance who amused him on occasion. Her shame warred with a swelling grief she did not entirely understand. She wanted to despise him for making her feel exposed, for standing there with all that quiet concern. She wanted to blame him for not stepping in sooner or louder or more decisively. But deep down, she also feared something else, the truth that she had always hoped he might look at her differently one day. And tonight, for a fleeting moment, it felt as though he finally had. The realization startled her so deeply she almost stopped walking. Was it possible? Could she trust her senses? Or had loneliness deceived her again? Behind her, she sensed movement. Adrian stepping into the conservatory, his gaze fixed entirely on her. She did not turn, but she felt the tension in the air shift, growing taut like a string pulled too tight. He hesitated for a brief second, then began moving toward her with steady, deliberate steps. Eveline exhaled shakily. Her world, once predictable, had suddenly cracked at the edges. She reached the far doorway of the conservatory. Before she stepped through, she allowed herself one small glance over her shoulder. Adrian stood several paces away, watching her with an expression she had never seen directed at her. Intense, conflicted, almost protective. Something unspoken burned in his eyes, something that made her heart thud violently. He looked as if he were deciding something that could shift the fate of them both. Eveline swallowed, the softest tremor running through her. She turned away before he could speak, leaving him in the shimmering glow of chandeliers and murmured anticipation, her own steps carrying her into the night, unaware that this was the moment Adrian Ravenshaw would no longer allow things to remain unchanged. And behind her, in the hush between violins tuning and the first dance beginning, the Duke made a silent vow that would alter everything to come. Rain swept across Ravenshaw Manor the next morning in soft, steady sheets, turning the stone terraces slick and the rose gardens glossy with trembling droplets. The storm had arrived without warning, veiling the estate in a silvery hush that seemed to mute the world's usual chatter. Lady Eveline Hartwell welcomed the quiet, though she knew it would not last. Rumors bred best in silence, and she felt certain the whispers from last night's garden party would spill into today like an unwelcome tide. She stood at her window, watching the rain trace thin lines across the glass. She tried to focus on the rhythmic pattern instead of the echo of sharp voices, voices that had judged her for a jest she wished she had never spoken aloud. Every word she had uttered to Adrian played in her mind with newfound weight. She had always teased him, always used playfulness to keep him at a safe distance from the hopes she buried. Last night, however, something had shifted in the Duke's eyes, something she both yearned for and feared. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A maid stepped inside, carrying a small folded parchment tied with violet ribbon. "This was left at your door, my lady," she said before departing quietly. Eveline frowned, untying the delicate ribbon. Inside lay a single pressed violet, its dark petals flattened perfectly, preserved with care. Beneath it, a short handwritten line read, "Let this remind you of your quiet strength, unseen yet undeniable." No signature, no clue, only a presence that felt far too intimate to be casual. She closed the parchment with a sharp breath. Someone was mocking her, surely. A gesture of affection on the very morning she had been humiliated? A cruel jest wrapped in softness. She placed the violet atop her writing desk, turning away before the glimmer of hope in her chest could take root. The corridors hummed with preparation for the evening's ball. Servants moved like shadows carrying linens, flowers, and trays of crystal. Yet beneath all that movement, there was a hushed vibration, subtle gazes exchanged, heads turning slightly when Eveline passed. She felt every flicker of scrutiny as though the air itself watched her. The rumors had traveled faster than she feared. She overheard her name again, caught in fragments behind a half-open door. She must be attempting to entrap the Duke, someone murmured. Why else would she speak to him so familiarly? She is desperate, another replied. It is a shame, really. Eveline's breath caught. Desperate. The word sliced. She moved swiftly away before the pain could settle too deeply. She refused to let tears form. The house already seemed eager to drink them. Unaware of her passage, Adrian Ravenshaw approached from the opposite direction. He carried himself with rigid poise, though his eyes were shadowed with private frustration. He had spent the morning hearing whispers leaking through servants' corridors, thin, poisonous threads weaving a false portrait of Eveline as scheming, improper, clawing for his attention. The absurdity of it made his jaw tighten repeatedly. He had known her since childhood. She was incapable of such manipulation. Her teasing had always been a shield, never a trap. When he turned a corner, he nearly collided with two servants whispering about the scandal. They froze when they saw him. One attempted a curtsy, the other bowed awkwardly. Adrian's voice, usually smooth, carried a dangerous stillness. Rumors, he said, are a coward's refuge. I suggest you avoid them. The servants paled, nodding rapidly as he walked past. He did not tell Eveline of that moment. He wanted to be careful, wanted to understand what truly troubled her. And though she had left him abruptly the night before, he could still feel the quiet tremor in her voice when she insisted she did not need a defender. Something about her retreat haunted him. Something about her wounded pride gnawed at him. He had wished to speak to her, but she had disappeared before he could approach. Later, during the afternoon ballroom rehearsal, Eveline tried to bury her anxiety in the ordered steps of the dance. The polished floor gleamed like a lake of golden reflections beneath the chandelier light. She moved with the grace expected of a noble woman, though her thoughts fluttered wildly in her chest. When she faltered on a turn, her slipper sliding slightly, two men near the wall exchanged amused looks and muttered something under their breath. The laughter was too soft to be called mockery, but she felt it all the same. Adrian saw the stumble from across the room. Without a second thought, he crossed the ballroom floor, his boots echoing against marble. He reached her just as she steadied herself. "Allow me," he said, offering his gloved hand. His voice carried warmth carefully veiled beneath his reserved tone. Eveline hesitated before accepting, embarrassed by the attention. Yet when their hands touched, a quiet current ran between them, an undeniable spark she had long tried to ignore. Their eyes met, and the moment stretched, suspended in the golden hush of the ballroom. She looked away quickly, withdrawing her hand. "Thank you, Your Grace," she murmured. "It was only a misstep." He nodded, though his expression revealed he did not fully believe her. When she later returned to the dressing area to retrieve her gloves, she found another folded note tucked into the palm of one. Her breath caught when she unfolded it. "Strength unsettles those who possess none. Do not let their shadows touch your light." Still no signature, but the handwriting, sharp yet elegant, felt strangely familiar. Her pulse quickened with confusion. Could it be him? Or merely someone mimicking a noble script to deepen the cruel joke? Adrian, meanwhile, searched for the worst of the gossiping noble women and found her near the quartet of musicians, whispering gleefully with her companions. He approached her with deliberate calm, leaning slightly toward her in a posture that suggested polite conversation, yet carried an unmistakable warning. "Some reputations," he said, "are far more fragile than others. One ought to be cautious before tearing at someone else's integrity, lest her own unravel first." The woman flushed, stammering a denial. Adrian simply walked away, uninterested in her defense. But he did not realize Eveline had witnessed the tense interaction from behind a column. She saw only his stern posture, not the protective intention behind it. Her heart sank, assuming he was admonishing the noblewoman for speaking of him, not for harming her. The misinterpretation deepened her sense of isolation. She slipped out of the ballroom rehearsal, her steps quickening through the echoing hall. She did not look back. Had she paused, she would have seen Adrian watching her leave again. This time, not with concern alone, but with the unmistakable weight of a man reaching the end of restraint. That evening's storm grew heavier. Lanterns flickered in the dimming halls, as though anticipating a revelation that neither of them could yet name. And somewhere in the quiet distance of Ravenshore Manor, Adrian made a choice that would bring him to her before the night was done. The storm deepened as evening fell, the manor's windows shuddering beneath the wind's long sighs. Servants hurried down candlelit corridors, carrying linens and trays that trembled with every distant rumble. Lady Eveline Hartwell slipped away from the bustle, seeking refuge in the library where the world felt muted and warm, sheltered by shelves towering with leather-bound volumes. The crackling fire cast amber light across the dark wood, gilding the room with a glow that soothed even as her mind wrestled with the morning's turmoil. She closed the door gently behind her. Silence wrapped around her like a shawl of safety, the scent of aged paper and burning cedar settling her breath. At last, she could release the ache she had carried since dawn. She moved to the tall window overlooking the drenched gardens and rested her hand on the cold glass. Her reflection wavered slightly in the pane, as if she were only half here, caught between longing and fear, between truth and the whispering lies spun by society. She tried to steady her thoughts. She tried not to think of Adrian's gaze in the ballroom, or the way his voice had softened when he steadied her. She tried not to remember the notes, those quiet, tender messages that felt too gentle to be a mockery, yet too impossible to be real. She told herself not to hope. Hope had already betrayed her once in the form of cruel laughter. The library door opened behind her. Her breath faltered. She turned slowly, and there he was. Duke Adrian Ravenshore entered with a quiet deliberation that felt heavier than thunder. The door shut behind him with a soft click that seemed to seal them into another world entirely. Rain tapped insistently against the windows, but inside, the fire cast a warm glow across his shoulders, softening the sharp lines of his black coat. He did not speak at first. Neither did she. They stood several paces apart, separated by a silence dense with everything they had not said through years of polite distance and stifled feelings. His expression held a gravity she had only glimpsed before, like a man who had reached the end of patience and caution both. "I did not expect company," Eveline said finally. Her voice was thin, though she tried to mask the tremor beneath it. "I imagine you did not," Adrian replied. He stepped closer, leaving the shelter of the doorway. "Yet I find I cannot let the night end without speaking to you." Her heart drummed against her ribs. "If this is about the whispers—" "It is not," he interrupted softly, but his tone carried an edge she could not decipher. Or rather, not only about them. Thunder rolled in the distance. Eveline felt the words gather painfully in her throat. "Then why are you here?" "To understand," he said, "why you ran from me last night." She swallowed hard. "I did not run." "Eveline," his voice gentled, dipping into the quiet register she had always secretly admired. "You did." She looked away, not in shame, but in a fragile attempt to protect herself from a truth she feared would crack her open. "If I left abruptly, it was because conversations overheard in gardens have consequences, and because I do not enjoy being the subject of ridicule. You were ridiculed for a jest that was never disrespectful, for words you have spoken 100 times before." His steps were slow, controlled. "But last night, when you teased me, I felt something different in your voice. Something honest." Heat rose to her cheeks, though she kept her posture steady. "I should not have spoken so casually in public. It gave them fuel." "They needed no fuel," he replied calmly. "They create their own flames." She faced him again, forcing strength into her spine. "Your Grace, those rumors concern you. If I remain near you, I am not discussing their concerns," he said sharply. Then he softened. "I am discussing yours." Eveline froze. Adrian exhaled, as though releasing a confession he had shielded for too long. "You have always carried yourself with grace, even when you believed otherwise. Your teasing, it disarms me. It unsettles me. And last night, when you walked away, I realized I could no longer pretend it meant nothing. Her breath tangled. He took another step toward her, closing the distance until only a few careful feet separated them. "I have been patient," he said quietly. "Too patient, perhaps. But you looked at me as though you feared I might reject you." And that, Eveline, that struck deeper than any rumor. Lightning briefly illuminated his face, revealing conflict and something gentler beneath. She could not look at him without trembling. "I do not fear your rejection," she whispered. "I fear misunderstanding you. I fear reading hope where there is none." He held her gaze for a long, suspended moment. "Then allow me to be clear." Her breath stalled. He stepped closer still, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, though he touched nothing. "Last night, when you teased me," he paused, searching her face with a quiet intensity that made her pulse stumble. "I realized that I have spent years hiding the truth behind courtesy. I cannot pretend indifference anymore." Her heart throbbed painfully. "Adrian." "And so," he said softly, "I must set a rule between us." Her pulse quickened violently. "A rule? A boundary? A warning?" He leaned in, not touching, but close enough that she felt her breath catch in her throat. "If you tease me again," he whispered, voice low as velvet sliding over steel, "I will answer you honestly. No guarded courtesy. No polite distance. No withdrawal into propriety. I will respond as a man who can no longer hide what he feels." Heat swept through her. The firelight flickered across his cheek, the rain tracing thin silver trails down the window behind them. She stood perfectly still, afraid to breathe in case it shattered the moment. Eveline tried to steady her voice. "And if I cannot stop teasing you, then," he said, barely above a whisper, "everything between us will change." Silence stretched, charged, fragile, luminous. She wanted to ask what he meant, but her voice failed her. Something in her eyes must have answered him anyway, because he inhaled softly, as though steadied by her unspoken permission to remain close. At that moment, a knock shook the door, muffled but insistent. "Your Grace," came a voice from the hall. "They are requesting your presence." He did not move. "Tell them to wait." Eveline's breath trembled when she realized he had chosen to stay here, with her, rather than return to the safety of expectation. She whispered, "Then I must be more careful with my words, or perhaps far less." Something deep in his expression shifted, something dangerous and tender all at once. But before he could speak, the knocking came again, sharper this time, dragging the moment toward interruption. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, pained by the intrusion. And Eveline knew this fragile, breathtaking pause between them was not the end, but the edge of something irrevocable. The ballroom bloomed into brilliance as night fully claimed Ravensshore Manor. Chandeliers blazed like captive constellations, their lights scattering across marble floors polished to a mirrored sheen. Music unfurled in slow, elegant phrases, violins lifting the air into something almost reverent. Lady Eveline Hartwell entered beneath that glow with her spine straight and her pulse unsteady, aware that every eye measured her worth before she had taken 3 steps. Her gown, a subdued ivory threaded with silver, spoke not of defiance, but of resolve, and she wore it as armor. Whispers rippled outward as she passed, delicate as lace yet sharp as pins. Some were curious, some cruel, some hungry for spectacle. Eveline felt them all, but she did not falter. She had chosen to come. She had chosen not to hide. The rule he had set echoed through her, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure, and she wondered whether she possessed the courage to test it beneath such scrutiny. Across the room, Duke Adrian Ravensshore stood with practiced composure, acknowledging greetings with a nod, a word, a measured smile. Inside, however, tension coiled like a drawn bow. He had heard the warning minutes earlier, delivered with feigned concern by a woman whose delight in scandal barely concealed itself. Eveline, she claimed, intended to confess her attachment publicly, to force his hand and secure a promise by spectacle rather than merit. The notion struck him as absurd, yet it unsettled him nonetheless, not because he doubted Eveline's integrity, but because he feared she might be driven to desperation by the cruelty around her. His gaze found her at once. The sight of her stilled him. She moved with a quiet grace that defied the rumors, her expression composed, her eyes luminous with something he could not yet name. Relief swept through him, quickly followed by urgency. If the night turned against her, he would not allow her to stand alone. They met near the edge of the floor as the orchestra softened into a pause. "You look well," he said, the formality of his tone at odds with the intensity in his eyes. "As do you," Eveline replied. Her voice was steady, though her fingers curled lightly at her side. "The room suits you." "It does not suit everyone," he said quietly. She understood him at once. "Nor has it ever," she answered, and something fragile passed between them, an acknowledgment without blame. The music resumed, a measured waltz, and couples stepped forward. Adrian offered his arm. Eveline hesitated for a heartbeat, conscious of watching eyes, then accepted. The contact sent a subtle current through her, grounding and electric all at once. As they joined the dance, conversation ebbed around them, attention sharpening to a point that pricked her nerves. "You should know," he murmured as they turned, "that there are those who wish to see you embarrassed tonight." Her steps remained smooth. "They have wished it before." "Yes," he said, "but tonight they are bold." She lifted her chin. "Then I will give them nothing." They circled once, twice. His hand at her waist was careful, respectful, yet firm enough to convey support. She felt his awareness as keenly as her own, each movement charged with unspoken meaning. When the music drew them closer, his voice dropped. "Did you receive the notes?" Her breath caught. "They were yours." "They were," he said, unflinching. "Every word." Emotion surged, swift and overwhelming. Before she could respond, a sharp laugh cut through the music. A woman's voice rose, clear and deliberate. "How touching," she said. "It seems Lady Eveline has at last cornered the Duke." The room stilled. Heat rushed to Eveline's face, her chest tightening as faces turned openly now, no longer hiding their interest. Adrian felt her falter and tightened his hold just enough to steady her. His expression hardened into resolve. "That is enough," he said, his voice carrying without strain. The woman pressed on, emboldened. Surely his grace should clarify his intentions. We would hate to see misunderstandings flourish. Adrian did not answer her. Instead, he turned Eveline gently and guided her away from the floor, his hand firm, his purpose unmistakable. Murmurs rose behind them, but he did not slow until they reached a side corridor washed in shadow and candlelight. She pulled her arm free, trembling. "You should not have done that." "I should have done it sooner," he replied. Her eyes shone, bright with unshed tears and restrained fury. "They think I am scheming, that I am shameless." "They think what they wish," he said, stepping closer. "I will not let them define you." "You cannot protect me from everything," she said softly. "No," he agreed, "but I can choose what I allow." She searched his face, uncertainty warring with hope. "And what do you choose?" He took a breath, steadying himself. "I choose clarity." From the ballroom drifted a swell of music and voices, distant now. He reached for her hand again, slower this time, asking rather than claiming. She allowed it, her fingers warm against his glove. "If they demand a declaration," he said, his tone low and unwavering, "they shall have one. But it will not be theirs to shape." Her heart thundered. "Adrian!" He held her gaze, his expression unguarded. "Trust me." A footstep echoed at the far end of the corridor, a reminder that the night pressed on, that the world waited. Eveline inhaled, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones. She nodded once. Adrian turned toward the ballroom, her hand still in his, and in the candlelit hush before they stepped back into the blaze of judgment and music, he leaned close and whispered, "Whatever comes next, I will not retreat." And Eveline knew the next moment would change everything. Rain softened the edges of the night as Adrian led Eveline onto the terrace beyond the ballroom, where lanterns glowed like patient stars and the storm breathed more gently. The music inside swelled and receded, dulled by stone and distance, until it felt as though the world had narrowed to the space between them. Eveline's heart still raced from the corridor, from the murmurs, from the certainty that she stood at the brink of something she could no longer pretend was harmless. Adrian released her hand only to face her fully. In the lanternlight, his composure loosened, not into disorder, but into honesty. "They have taken too much from you," he said quietly. "Your words, your intentions, even your silences. I will not let them take this moment as well." She searched his face, seeing resolve etched alongside restraint. "You owe me nothing," she replied, though her voice wavered. "Your name, your position, they are not mine to burden." He shook his head once. "You mistake me, Eveline. This is not obligation. It is choice." The rain whispered against the balustrade, a steady rhythm that calmed her breath. "Then speak plainly," she said. "No rules, no warnings, only truth." He drew a slow breath, as though steadying himself against a force as powerful as the storm. "I have known you since we were children," he began. "I watched you grow bold in rooms that wished you small. I admired it even when I pretended not to. Your teasing unsettled me because it pierced the armor I built to survive expectation. And when the world turned cruel to you, I realized that armor had become a refuge for cowardice." Her throat tightened. "I never meant to unsettle you." "I know," he said. "You were protecting yourself, as was I." Silence opened between them, tender rather than empty. Eveline felt years of restraint loosening, thread by careful thread. "I teased you," she admitted, "because it was safer than wanting you. Because wanting you felt foolish. Untouchable things should not be desired." He lifted her hand slowly, reverently, stopping short of her lips. "Nothing about you is foolish," he said, "and you are not untouchable to me." She nodded, a small, brave motion that carried the weight of surrender. He pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, not possessive, but reverent, as though sealing a vow rather than claiming a prize. The contact sent warmth spiraling through her, steadying where fear had lingered. From the terrace doors came a ripple of voices, curiosity sharpening into expectation. Eveline felt it like a tide pressing inward. "They are waiting," she whispered. "Yes," he replied, gaze steady. "And they will wait a moment longer." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I set a rule because I feared crossing a line I could not retreat from. But tonight, I understand that retreat is no longer an option." Her pulse leapt. A smile curved at the corner of her mouth, tremulous yet daring. "Then allow me one last tease, Your Grace." His breath caught, and something like wonder flickered across his face. "You tempt fate." "Perhaps," she said softly. "Or perhaps I trust it." She leaned in just enough of the rain-cooled air to carry her words. "You always did hide behind titles. I wonder what remains when they fall away." He answered without hesitation. "A man who chooses you." The declaration landed not with spectacle, but with quiet force, reshaping the world around them. Eveline felt tears sting, not of shame this time, but of release. The years of being measured, dismissed, misunderstood, all softened beneath the certainty in his voice. He offered his arm again. "Shall we return?" Together, they crossed the threshold into the ballroom. Conversations faltered. Music softened, then stilled. Eyes followed them, as though drawn by an unspoken current. Adrian did not pause. He guided Eveline to the center of the room and turned to face the gathered assembly. "My friends," he said, his voice calm, yet commanding, "there has been much said tonight, much assumed. I would spare you further conjecture." A hush fell, so complete Eveline could hear her own heartbeat. "I have long valued Lady Eveline's wit, her courage, and her integrity," he continued. "If there is familiarity between us, it is because I invited it. If there is affection, it is because I returned it. And if there is any misunderstanding, let it end here." Murmurs rippled outward, transforming from mockery into astonishment. Eveline stood at his side, spine straight, no longer bracing for impact. She felt anchored. Adrian turned to her then, his expression softening. "May I claim the next dance?" She answered with a smile that held no apology. "You may." As the orchestra resumed, the world shifted. Where whispers once sharpened, They now blurred into insignificance. Eveline moved with him across the floor, each step lighter, surer. She did not glance at the faces lining the room. She needed only the steady presence at her side. When the dance ended, applause followed, not thunderous, but sincere enough to signal acceptance, or at least awe. Adrian leaned close. "This is not the end," he murmured. "Only the beginning." She met his gaze, laughter bright in her eyes. "I should warn you, I am unlikely to stop teasing." His smile deepened. "Then I shall answer honestly, every time." Beyond the windows, the rain eased, lanterns glowing brighter as clouds thinned. Eveline felt the night breathe with her, as though acknowledging the courage it had taken to step into the open. She squeezed Adrian's hand once, a quiet promise returned. And in that moment, beneath chandeliers and softened judgment, Eveline understood that the rule which had once frightened her had become her freedom, and that the fate shaped by whispers had been rewritten by a single, unwavering choice.